Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 2nd of September, 2022, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me via video link is Patrick Henningsen and from the United States, and Vanessa Beeley from Syria and Damascus. So we'll get straight on here with, this is the last chance to vote if you're a Tory party member. Today is the day. Liz and Rishi will sort out their competition this weekend, and on Monday the announcement will be made as to who it's going to be. I'm obviously putting my money on Liz. Patrick, I think you have your money on Liz.
I'm not betting on this election. I can't. It's illegal to bet on politics in the United States right now. So, unfortunately, I won't be able to participate in the gambling.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear about that. Well, that's fine. Vanessa, any thoughts? You're going for Liz as well because she's going to be, as Foreign Secretary, the best person to look after Syria, Russia, and China, right?
Oh God, I mean they're both hideous. I don't know how you can. If I had to bet, I would also go with Liz.
Yes.
As much as
Okay.
it pains me to say.
Okay, well, we'll wait with bated breath over the weekend for that. But let's move on to more serious issues and the cost of living. And this morning, the BBC was pushing out an interview with this guy, Stephen Fitzpatrick from OVO Energy. And I just thought I would take you through the point that he was making. Because obviously the question is, how is anybody going to be able to afford their energy bills this winter and into next year? Because the peak in terms of cost is going to be sort of April, May time next year, according to the forecasts so far. Of course, winter is the hardest time of year at the same time. So this was his idea. The challenge that we've got, he said, is that we don't know how long this situation is going to last for. It could be years of higher prices, he said. One of the ways we think this could be done most effectively, that is helping people through this problem, is by launching a tariff deficit mechanism where we lower the price of energy, but we do it for a certain number of units per household at a lower price band that everybody gets access to. And then over and above that, consumers would pay the full price. What that would mean is that it would disproportionately benefit lower income households, but at the same time provide everybody with the incentive to find energy savings. And Patrick, very briefly, that is the key point here. This is about behavior change. It seems to me this is effectively Great Reset, World Economic Forum, Green New Deal, whatever sort of phrase you want to attach to it. It's the effect of policy.
Yeah, these are not solutions to the problem. This is the thing. It's not costing the power companies or the state or anybody more money to extract the energy or the natural gas from the ground or gather, whatever they need to burn coal or whatever. Yeah, there is an increase in cost in some transportation and, a marginal overall increases. The big price increases are coming from this unbridled energy market, this sort of free floating energy market. This is what is going to bankrupt people all around Europe and the UK, in the United States as well, but very much so in Europe and the UK. So the politicians don't have any solutions for the runaway energy markets. So they can't tell you that the prices are not going to rise another 30 or 40% in January, February, March next year, etc. Where does it end? This is the problem. There's fundamental distortions in the energy markets as a result of what has been set up post 2000. And now, not only that, because of the policies that are being pursued by the government, i.e., sanctions and suicidal green policies, net zero carbon policies, and how we're getting our energy, trying to cancel Russian energy, etc. And these are causing even more distortions in the market, force multipliers that are, basically giving us what we have now, which is effectively bankrupting working class and middle class families, individuals right across the country, right across Europe.
Indeed, and that's absolutely correct. So, just a little bit of light relief. On Wednesday, I think it was Debbie was talking about the fact that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were investing in new toilets. This is the page from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, reinventing the toilet challenge, a brief history if anybody wants to go and have a look at it. But anyway, a couple of days ago, Samsung announced that they've developed a prototype for this. So this is the key paragraph. The system enables the treated water to be fully recycled. Solid waste is dehydrated, dried, and combusted into ashes, while liquid waste is treated through a biological purification process. And I'm just thinking, well, okay, are we going to use our toilets to heat our homes at this point, Patrick? Because this is how ridiculous this whole thing is getting.
I think that's a brilliant idea, Mike, and it just shows how you are so well placed to be in a position in the ministry to make such decisions, being so creative. You
Yes,
understand, you recognize all the sustainability challenges, Mike. That's a brilliant idea. We need to go full bore ahead on that.
I think so. But let's come on to the issue of smart meters, Patrick. And the question, well, you're describing this as the long con.
You know, how long have we been talking about smart meters, Mike? There's been a lot of people doing activist campaigns about them. A lot of people have been focusing on the radiation aspect or the EMF aspect of this, causing people to be irritable, losing sleep, stress, and things like that. So the health problems associated or alleged health problems associated with having a smart meter in your house. But the other conversation, which we've had as well on the UK column, is what exactly is the purpose of these smart meters in terms of regulating an individual's energy use at home, or maybe charging them in real time according to fluctuations in the market from this scam energy market, which we just talked about a minute ago. And here now we're finally, Mike, seeing the end game. We're finally seeing the end game here. You've got a whole bunch of customers, in this case, 22,000 customers signed up for this special rewards program, AC Rewards. Okay, so they thought that they were going to basically get some savings or some benefits from this. But effectively, what they signed up for is they're being locked, their thermostats are being locked remotely on the hottest day of the year. This is in Denver in this case. And so this is incredible what's happened here. And I don't know if we have a video, which we could show in a minute, but the way that they've sold this is that the thermostat companies are basically saying this is about convenience, et cetera. And they find that they won't be able to turn their air conditioning up because this is during peak hours. So remote control of your air conditioning. Now imagine if this was in the winter, Mike, and it's the coldest day of the year, and the energy companies, because it's peak time, and you've unfortunately signed up for this rewards program, then they're saying, you know, you can't have any more heat in your house. Just not going to happen. And this is because of the smart meter system. Okay, so I mean, this is just really unbelievable. I think we do have a video of this from the local affiliate in Denver, Colorado, if we have that video.
Yes, let's roll that.
Another hot one today with temperatures in the low 90s.
Even Mike Nelson would tell you Tuesday was a hot one.
The heat goes on.
Which is why Tony Tallarico tried to crank up the AC.
I mean, it was 90 out, and it was right during the peak period.
That's when he found out he had no control of his thermostat. A message from Excel on his thermostat saying temperature locked during an energy emergency.
And normally, when we see a message like that, we're able to override it. In this case, we weren't. So our thermostat was locked in at 78 or 79.
Turns out he's not alone. Excel confirms to Contact Denver 7, 22,000 customers were locked out of their smart thermostats for hours on Tuesday.
It's a voluntary program. Let's remember that this is something that customers choose to be a part of. Based on the incentives.
Excel VP Emmett Romine says customers enrolled in the Colorado AC Rewards program sign up to get money back, but give up some control for the greater good.
So it helps everybody for people to participate in these programs. It is a bit uncomfortable for a short period of time, but it's very, very helpful.
And it's rare. This is the first time since the 6-year-old program started that customers could not override their smart thermostats. Excel says an unexpected outage in Pueblo, combined with hot weather and heavy AC use, led to the last-minute energy emergency.
To me, an emergency means there is, life, limb, or, some other danger out there, some, massive wildfires.
Tony's all about saving energy with solar panels and smart home systems, but he says he had no idea locked thermostats came with that, and it's not what he signed up for.
Even if it's a once in a blue moon situation. It just doesn't sit right with us to not be able to control our own thermostat in our house.
No, Mike, we've spoken about this issue about smart meters many times, and you've rightly pointed out that they're going to be able to gouge customers in the future with smart meters that are basically tracking peak use price, real time, et cetera. All these people, Mike, signed up because they thought they'd get money back or they'd get some savings, so they signed up for this rewards program. But it's basically similar to what we had warned about many times previously.
Yes, indeed. So let's just put this this graphic on screen there and have a read this. So it says, by participating in AC rewards, adjustments are made to your smart thermostat during the hottest summer days. When the demand for electricity is the highest, you'll help us manage these peaks and ease the strain on the electrical grid. You'll be cut back at the time your central air works to cool your home with control events. But Patrick, this is, I mean, he was obviously the participant in that interview was obviously confused about what constitutes an emergency, but the emergency was for the grid itself and the fact that the grid was not coping with a failure. And of course, this is representative of the collapse of infrastructure in so-called first world countries. Every the United States, Europe, UK, all experiencing the same type of lack of resilience.
So, how do you know as a customer whether this is happening, whether there's actually a failure in the grid, or if there's an actual shortage of energy that's feeding the grid, or a short?
And we've unfortunately lost Patrick. So we'll hopefully come back to that in a second. Well, let's just move on, or we'll just show this because it says here, control events may occur anytime during the cooling season. You'll have the ability to opt out of control events at any time and receive optional notifications of control events, either from your thermostat, mobile device, or web app. On rare occasions, system emergencies may cause a control event that cannot be overridden. And then finally, it says Excel incentivizes the program by offering one-time enrollment credit of $100 and an annual credit of $25 for joining the program. Well, that's a pretty small recompense for what's going on there, Patrick.
Yeah, it is, Mike. And as I was saying before, that you don't know whether the problem you're experiencing, called this control event that's been implemented by the power companies, whether that's a result of an actual failure in the grid or an actual shortage of energy. You don't know. You're just taking their word for it up at central command. And so it can be very easy to control large portions of the population who are signed up or on these types of smart meter systems. And they just have to take the word of the HQ that this is why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And the idea that this is going to save you money to sign up to any of these is kind of ridiculous if you think of the massive fluctuations in the cost of wholesale energy and the gouging that keeps going on from these power companies.
Yes, so let's just have a look at a graphic here that you've produced on smart meters. And it's saying 1 in 3 homes have problems with their smart meter, according to the 2019 U-Switch survey. They don't automatically save you money, and the meter may not always connect to the internet. And the question is, what happens if it doesn't?
Exactly. Listen, the list of problems with these smart meters is endless, basically. The displays can stop responding. If you look at the U-Switch survey, has a lot of interesting data in it. The installation takes hours. The whole machine can stop functioning. The meters may stop being, quote, smart after you switch providers. If so, and for instance, if you won't, it won't save you money or fight climate change. Because isn't that the whole reason why this is how these systems have been sold? And again, they sometimes won't connect to the internet. And so the anxiety from smart meters, put the EMF issue aside, the thing they don't work. Where does that leave you if you're at the mercy of this technology? So
Yes, yeah, indeed. Good questions. Right, okay, so let's move on then to this. This was tweeted out by the Office for National Statistics this morning, saying we're publishing a new release on the behavioral impacts of rising automotive fuel prices. Fuel prices peaked at 48% above the previous year in July 2022, with consumers reducing their fuel demanded per transaction by 16% in the same period. But they went on to say that consumers demanded 6% more fuel per transaction than the previous period in response to Russian invasion of Ukraine. So although it's down on 12 months ago, it's up on the previous month. And they're saying that the number of adults facing cost of living increases who have cut back on non-essential vehicle travel increased by 14% over the previous period. So the impact's clearly pretty huge. And then we've got this, because if we're talking about the effect on the poorest in the community, then this from My London. South London Food Bank feeding thousands may not make it to Christmas due to £30,000 energy bill just to run their fridges. We can't go forward because we've no funding and we don't have any sense that our bills are going, what our bills are going to be going forward, says the We Care Food Bank. So that is a pretty significant situation for people that are reliant on these kind of services. And of course, they're reliant on energy. And finally, on this segment, Patrick, US life expectancy, the lowest in decades after dropping nearly a full year in 2021.
This is really an incredible story, and this is indicative of where we're at in our sort of advanced Western democracies and civilizations. One of the biggest metrics, wherever you're looking in the world, if you're looking at a government and looking at how good of a job a government is doing and how well-functioning society is, there's two metrics that you can look at. One of them is infant mortality. Infant mortality rates is usually a pretty good barometer of where healthcare systems are at, where other sort of social support mechanisms are, et cetera, technology, et cetera. The other is average life expectancy. So in the United States, a sharp drop from 2019 to 2021 on life expectancy. Wait for the 2022 numbers to come out in the new year. So what does this mean? This means you could say this is an absolute abject failure of government or of a society when you start seeing statistics like this. Now, there's a lot of reasons why we could say what's feeding into this trend. You've got diet, you've got the overuse of pharmaceuticals, you've got overexposure to chemicals, you've got swimming in a digital sea of EMF. You've got all these things. Plus, we could add the vaccine issue into this as well. That's maybe something you might expand on if you correlate these things with all-cause mortality, for instance. But the bottom line is this is a total failure. This is guilty, total failure of government, of society, when you start seeing trends like this. So whatever the job of government is, it's not up to scratch.
Indeed, and just at the bottom of that graphic, actually, Patrick, it said US deaths from drug overdoses hit high, driven by fentanyl. And in the United States, this is a particular problem. In the UK and Scotland, it's a problem as well. But the drug issue in the States should not be underestimated.
No, it shouldn't. And you can also correlate this with lockdowns, of course, if you're going to look at this data set from 2020, for instance, and 2021. But, in terms of demographics, this is a serious, a drop for Hispanic, Blacks, and whites, around 2.4 years drop in terms of life expectancy. Native Americans, 6.6 years drop in life expectancy over this period. So there's one group of people, one demographic that's getting absolutely hit with this trend. And so there should be congressional hearings about this. There should be public hearings about this to find out and try to discover what are the sort of mechanisms that are driving this, especially for instance, Native Americans. I mean, it's apocalyptic. If you look at this in terms of trends. So this is something that people need to pay attention to in Europe, in the UK as well. Look at these numbers in this year, looking back the last 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask also if the lack of access to healthcare in the States, which has been deteriorating dramatically over the last 2 years, whether that's having an effect as well.
Well, I think in the United States, you have two. The healthcare issue is very complex because it's a structural issue. We have different, private health insurers, but we also have a huge medical insurance programs from the federal government, Medicaid and Medicare. We probably spend a lot more per capita than most countries for healthcare that's being rationed at the government level. And if you're from the UK and you look at the NHS and you want to have a conversation about rationing care and overinflated prices within the medical industrial complex, there's a lot of commonalities there. But you have this huge private insurance. But a lot of the private insurers are being paid through corporate. So, of course, if you're employed, it's likely you'll have an insurance package connected with your employer. If you're unemployed or you're on benefits, you most likely, or you're under senior citizens, for instance, retirees, pensioners, will have some access to either state or federal Medicaid or Medicare. So, but for Native Americans, for instance, there's whole other issues, social and problematic issues with access, with services, with drug abuse, alcohol abuse as well, and some reservations, for instance, that are going to feed into that particular thing. But it's a systemic issue the United States has, and for the argument for centralized state healthcare, if you look at the total failure of the NHS in Britain as a result of COVID, you could also make the argument that centralized healthcare can also become a disaster if it's managed the way that the UK runs it at the moment.
Indeed. Well, let's come on to centralised healthcare in the UK and GP earnings. The NHS Digital has released the latest GP earnings and expenses estimates for 2020, 2021, and they're showing a significant increase, 11% rise compared to the same figures last year. So this is England. The estimated average income before tax of GPs in either general medical services or a primary medical services practice was £111,900 for combined contractor and salaried GPs. This is for England, 142,000 for contractor GPs, 64,900 for salaried. And Scotland, not too much different, 107,000. Wales, 108,000. Northern Ireland, 104,000. This, of course, has seen the usual outcries because, of course, GPs totally inaccessible at the moment for many, many people. Now let's have a look at this. One of the things, Patrick, Vanessa, that we've seen over the last period has been this idea of mass medication, fluoride being one, mandates on vaccines being another, and this issue of amending the bread and flour regulations has been one that's been discussed several times on the programme because the government keeps announcing it. Well, they've announced it once again. So folic acid is to be added to wholemeal flour across the UK to help prevent life-threatening brain and spinal conditions in fetuses. DEFRA, this is DEFRA that has launched this. So the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has launched UK-wide consultation on the bread and flour regulations on the amount of folic acid to be added to flour. And of course, therefore, nobody gets the choice about whether to take it or not. It's assumed that if you're going to eat bread, you're going to get it. Whereas in the past, it was up to pregnant women to decide whether or not they would take this as a supplement. So this consultation opened yesterday. It closes on the 23rd of November 2022. And if you want to search online for amending the bread and flour regulations 1998, you will find that. And so the government is asking for opinions from the general public on this. And I ask everybody to give their opinions on it, on whether you think that this type of sort of default mass medication is the right way forward. And then finally, I just wanted to mention this from the BBC. Mystery pneumonia. Argentina investigates 3 deaths. They've apparently discovered patient 0. They're saying that they've ruled out COVID, they've ruled out flu. They don't know what it is, but I'm sure we'll hear lots about it in the not too distant future. Sorry, one more just to mention here, and that is from the legal press in India. Bombay High Court has issued a notice to Serum Institute and Bill Gates on a plea for compensation, alleging a death due to Covishield, which is the COVID vaccination in India. So the Bombay High Court, this website reporting, recently sought responses from Serum Institute of India and Microsoft founder Bill Gates in a plea filed again by one Dilip Nunawat, seeking compensation for the death of his daughter, who he claimed was killed as a result of side effects of COVID vaccine Covishield. Gates, involved with the Serum Institute of India, and the Indian authorities have acknowledged that this young lady was, in fact, did die as a result of Covishield. So we will watch that one with interest. Now, let's move on. If you like what the UK column does and you'd like to support us, then please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there, or you could pick something up at the UK column shop. But please do share our material on the various platforms, and that would be very much appreciated. So let's move on to Ukraine and so on. And we're starting off here with Al Jazeera, and the headline is Russia-Ukraine updates, IAEA seeks permanent presence at plant. And of course, we're talking about the nuclear plant that's been in the media quite a lot over the last few days, Patrick.
Yeah, this is the Europe's largest nuclear facility, the most amount of reactors at Zaporizhzhia, and there's been clashes there recently. This has been reported in the international press as both sides are at fault. We get this usual sort of narrative that's trying to basically say both sides are at fault. I'll show you some interesting statements from the UN in just a second. But this, Mike, this is exactly what we've spoken about on the program previously in reference to this issue, is that this would provide any sort of escalation around these nuclear power plants, will provide the, quote, international community with the sort of backdoor that they've been looking for. I'm talking about NATO, the United States, G7 countries, to get some sort of a foothold into Ukraine. And this is exactly what's been playing out now this week. So they're moving in with inspectors, and what's happened, there's been a series of provocations. The international community is trying to say that it's partly Russia's fault, when in fact, if you actually look at these statements, the data, the evidence that's being presented internationally, it's pretty obvious that Ukraine or Ukrainian commandos have been responsible for the attacks, the provocations. And so Russia's invited and has been pursuing the International Atomic Energy Agency to come in with inspectors to make sure that the site's okay. They've been cooperating with them, but it's being cast in the international media as like Russians, aren't sort of, cooperating properly, etc. So this has been spun incredibly. So now we see, this brings us to the other part of this, is that Russia has captured some Ukrainian soldiers who were in the process of mounting an attack around this facility. And so this is exactly what we saw, very similar to what you saw in East Ghouta in 2013. You remember when the Syrian government invited the UN chemical weapons inspectors to come in, and then lo and behold, attacks on the UN convoy. International media tried to blame this on the, quote, Assad regime, how brazen they were to attack UN inspectors at Cala del Ponte and others who have come to basically inspect these sites. And this was going to be used as a pretext to mount military strikes on Syria at the time, if we remember. So this very similar situation here that could have unfolded, it looks like it's been thwarted by the Russians, and you won't hear a peep about this in the international media. So we put the heretical news story from RT, which is a Russian disinformation outlet, according to the UK government here. But it's pretty clear. Russia has also been thanked by the UN Secretary General Guterres' spokesperson. And you read this, and people will say, "Well, that's Russian propaganda." Well, actually, no. We've got a clip from the UN Secretary General spokesperson in New York now. If we can roll that.
Russian Defense Ministry today, it's about the IAEA mission to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russian Defense Ministry today stated that the Ukrainian group of saboteurs tried to attempted to seize, to capture the station in order to use the mission as a human shield. So they were neutralized according to Defense Ministry, and the officials of Russian Defense Ministry express bewilderment, I quote, due to the lack of reaction of the UN Secretary General to this incident. Do you have any reaction in this regard?
You know, we are glad that the Russian Federation did what it needed to do to keep the inspectors safe. I think our security people, our drivers have done a tremendous job in getting the IAEA inspectors in. They will continue to support the mission until it ends. And it is, like with any UN mission, it is the responsibility of those who have power over a certain area and who are responsible for a certain area to keep UN staff safe.
So there you have it. So, and again, I can't underline the similarities between what was unfolding in Syria in August of 2013. Similar type of situation. I don't know if Vanessa wants to comment on that one.
You're muted, Vanessa.
Not only 2013, even 2018. If you remember, when the OPCW inspectors arrived and they were taken to Douma, they were shot at by terrorist sleeper cells that were still present in the area, and they were swiftly brought back. And then, of course, the Syrian government was portrayed as delaying the investigation, despite their efforts to keep the UN or the OPCW inspectors effectively safe. So, and also, I think very similar conditions during the investigation of the MH17 crash also. So, you know, this is a familiar playbook by NATO proxies to disrupt any kind of investigation that will, of course, demonstrate who is responsible for the attacks, in this case on the nuclear plant, but in Syria, who's responsible for the chemical attack. Of course, we know the 2018 dossier was then completely buried and corrupted. But yeah, it's a familiar scene playing out.
Okay, Vanessa, let's move on to Syria then, and we're going to start off with a little bit of video. Do you want to just introduce this briefly?
Yeah, this is basically the latest Israeli attack that I'm quite sure nobody will have heard of in Western media. The BBC will not have covered this. This was 2 nights ago at around 8 o'clock at night. Israel attacked Aleppo International Airport from the Mediterranean coastal waters, and then 1 hour later attacked or tried to attack Damascus International Airport. So this is the attack filmed by an amateur, obviously, on Aleppo International Airport. So Aleppo International Airport did suffer material damage. There was damage to the runways. I was told today that the airport will be up and functional again or operational within 2 days. So it hasn't caused any lasting damage, and it's being dealt with just as quickly as, of course, they dealt with previously the attacks on Damascus International Airport. What is Israel trying to do? I mean, as I said, this was not reported. I couldn't find a report anywhere in Western media, only in the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is an opposition or terrorist-biased outlet based in the UK, funded by the EU. They do state that 4 Israeli shells hit a runway of the airport in Aleppo. But the interesting thing here, of course, there you also get the fact that there is a claim that it was Iranian missiles that were hit, which is totally nonsense. But interesting that here they also claim that Russian and Syrian government forces were positioned at the airport. This is true. Russia used to actually have planes at this airport. Not any longer. It now has a sort of skeleton staff and office there. But this is quite interesting because this is probably the first time that Israel has directly targeted an area that may have contained Russian military personnel. The report does also say that Israel gave a 10-minute warning or a warning to the Russians that were there to be able to evacuate from the area. That also is standard practice between Russia and Israel. Um, Now, what I really want to talk about here today is this continuing discourse, much of it on Twitter, I have to say, about uh, the perceived view that Russia is not doing enough to come to the aid of Syria during these Israeli attacks. The number one point I will make, of course, is that Russia, above all, respects Syrian sovereignty, and it is very careful to allow Syria to defend itself at every single opportunity. And Syria does a very good job of defending itself. The majority of the missiles, for example, that after the Aleppo airport attack, 1 hour later, they tried to target Damascus International Airport. Those missiles were intercepted and brought down, and Damascus Airport was kept safe. But I want to look at a story that has been circulating both in Israeli and American media, particularly, but has even been picked up within the independent media community. So this satellite image was published on Twitter by an organization called ImageSat International, claiming to show that Russia was redeploying its S-300 from close to Mesyaf. Now remember, Mesyaf Research Center was targeted by Israel 1 week ago now. And this was then picked up by if we actually look at who ISI are, they're a space-based intelligence world leader. Where are they based? In Israel. So this is Israeli intelligence basically leading with this story. The story is then picked up by Pentagon-aligned American war and defense sites like the War Zone. Now, the title here is particularly misleading. So it says Russia pulls its Syrian S-300 missile battery and ships it to the Black Sea. Now, I'll get on to exactly how many S-300s are inside Syria in a minute. But let's look at who's providing the intelligence for this article. Number one, of course, it's coming in from Ukrainian media like the Kiev Independent. Ukrainian intelligence, Russia has no more than 45%, sorry, I have to smile at this point, of its missiles left. And effectively, the claim here is that Russia needs this S-300 battalion back in Ukraine to enable it to continue in the conflict in Ukraine. So it's running out of missiles, apparently, according to this article. And it then goes on to say, regardless, Russia's decision to recall these missiles from Syria signals a dire need in its ongoing special military operation. They had a purpose, deterrent, symbolic or otherwise, in Syria that Israel underscored within days of the missile's departure. Now, a point I need to make here, this battery was withdrawn after the attack on the Mesyaf Research Center, so not before the attack on the research center. The article is trying to claim that Israel took advantage of the withdrawal of this S-300 battalion to carry out further attacks. Well, it didn't attack the Mesyaf Research Center, it attacked Aleppo and it attacked Damascus. It then goes on to say to shift such high-profile resource and leave a major ally exposed shows both Russia's laser focus on its increasingly precarious all-out invasion of Ukraine and the level of priority it now puts on its involvement in Syria and the Assad regime. This is ridiculous. Russia has been an ally of, or the Soviet Union has been an ally of Syria for decades. And it's one of the reasons that this war is happening. Russia, from a pragmatic realpolitik perspective, is not going to abandon Syria. Syria is the gateway to Eurasia. But even from a historical, military, bilateral agreement, it's not going to abandon Syria. In fact, military collaboration is extending and expanding within Syrian territory at the moment between Syria and Russia. Now, I've spoken to various people who have basically said to me the chances are that this particular battalion is being withdrawn in order to potentially be replaced by an updated version to increase the defense. But what is also important to make very clear here, Russia has deployed S-300s in Syria to defend its own positions, to defend Hymamim base, to defend Russian troop deployment inside Syria. Syria, however, has and it owns 4 battalions of S-300s. Now, what are the S-300s? So each battalion of S-300 system includes long-range radar to detect hostile targets, a vehicle that analyzes data, 6 vehicles that act as missile launchers. Each vehicle carries 6 missiles, and a short-range radar that tracks targets and directs missiles towards them. 2 missiles can be fired at each target within a time difference of no more than 3 seconds. The S-300 can deal with 24 aircraft or 16 ballistic missiles and has a range of 250 kilometers. Putting a battalion into engagement mode and dealing with hostile targets takes no more than 5 minutes when on the move, which is a very short time. Why are the S-300s that Syria has and that Russia is not taking away from Syria, why are they not being deployed? Well, I'll continue with this in a minute, but it's important to understand that Iran has also supplied missile defense systems to Syria from 2018 onwards, the Bavar 373, which has very similar technical capability to the S-300. In fact, it's potentially between the S-300 and the S-400. This also hasn't been deployed yet against Israeli hostility. Why? Because Syria knows full well that there is very probably going to be increased escalation in the future. Why is Israel carrying out these attacks now? It's trying to probe. It's trying to destroy Syria's economic capability by destroying the airports, but it's also destroying early warning radar systems, air defense bases or areas of air defense bases, launch pads in military air bases, etc. It's effectively trying to, 1, destroy Syria's defense capability should there be an escalation, and there is, of course, escalation now with Hezbollah over the gas fields, etc. And it's also trying to probe to see where the Iranian and the S-300 are, right? And for this reason, it also, what it does is it inundates Syria with missiles so that to some degree the air defense can respond to a certain number and then it has to reload. And at that point, Israel is able to target that area. Okay, so in my view, and in the view of many military experts here, Syria is simply not using these because it doesn't want to reveal where they are at this point in the conflict with Israel. They also have the Savom Khordad, which is equivalent to the BUK system from the Soviet Union. And of course, Syria is defending itself predominantly with the Pantsir S-1s, and it's doing a very adequate job with that. But I think, the important thing here is to quash this idea that Russia is abandoning Syria in any way, shape, or form, or that it doesn't allow Syria to use the S-300s. Whatever decisions are made over air defense are joint decisions with Syria in ascendancy. In other words, Syrian sovereignty is respected at all times. Now, what is also interesting is that Israel, through its various media, has at times claimed that Iran has used advanced air defense batteries against Israel and Syria. Again, according to my sources, not true. But this is justification for Israel to target Syria to try and eliminate what it deems as hostile Iranian military equipment inside Syria. Now, interesting language used in this Jerusalem Post article, war between war operations. This confirms the fact that Israel sees this as a sort of hiatus between wars, between the previous war, but it certainly perceives that there is another war coming with Syria, and that sort of bolsters my idea or my speculation that Syria is not using its more sophisticated air defense in order to keep the positioning hidden from Israel. Also, here, interesting, the IAF has carried out thousands of strikes on Syria since 2013, around 23 strikes already this year. None of them, of course, are protested by the UN or by any human rights organizations, and also has carried out strikes in Iraq and Yemen, again, very rarely mentioned in Western media. Now, I just want to cover a couple of other things that people are getting a little bit confused about. In Idlib, the government has basically put together a comprehensive settlement for everyone who wants to lay down arms in Idlib. It includes all the people of Idlib province who are in the areas controlled by the terrorists in the north or outside Syria, which includes Turkey, including military and civilians. Citizens wishing to settle will be received in Khan Sheikhoun, which is in southern Idlib, under the control of the Syrian Arab Army and the Russians and the Syrian government from Monday, September the 5th. This is in correlation with the fact that the government now is alleviating pressure on conscripts into the army. So this is an indication that the government now is taking its foot off the pedal of the military operations, except, of course, for special operations in the northeast. The other aspect, which is being hotly debated, particularly on Twitter, is whether there is going to be an imminent meeting between President Assad and President Erdogan. Erdogan and Turkey and his foreign minister have indeed been pushing a sort of rapprochement with Syria, but it's based on pressure, basically. Erdogan is facing an election in Turkey in June 2023. He was told very clearly at the summit in July, on July the 19th in Tehran, that if he entered Syria or if he continued with the military operation against the Kurdish separatists, then he would be fighting not only Syria, but Russia and Iran. So he's backed off on that. He's now making statements along the lines of diplomacy can never be cut off. Ankara needs to secure further steps with Syria. And he's backtracked completely on his original goal from 2011 to 2012 that he no longer wishes to defeat Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. This is coming because the power balance has shifted completely. And Erdogan knows that he needs President Assad, he needs Syria in order to deal with the Kurdish separatist issue. And he also needs President Assad to work with him on political solutions in order to hopefully lead to his re-election in June 2023. He needs to be able to deal with the refugee situation, 5 million Syrian refugees inside Turkey that Erdogan needs to deal with. That's a major issue for his election campaign. Also, the Turkish opposition is snapping at his heels and they're scenting blood. So the Turkish opposition has been pushing for meetings with Bashar al-Assad. So Erdogan basically is being pushed gradually more and more into a corner as regards Syria. And I don't think we're going to see an imminent meeting. My view is that President Assad, who's a long-term strategist, will wait and see what's happening leading up to the election before he makes any decision to have a public meeting with either, well, with the Turkish ruling party, whoever it may be.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Vanessa. Now, we're just sticking with defence and war and so on very quickly. The Irish Examiner here had this article this morning. India launches new aircraft carrier as China concerns grow. And the implication is that India is doing this because of China's development of its defense capabilities, and they're very concerned about China. I would just remind everybody about this huge exercise going on in the east of Russia, Vostok 2022, involving Russia, obviously, China, India, Kyrgyzstan, and the others that you can see on screen there. Now, India has, of course, taken part in exercises with other nations as well. India and the EU, according to Naval Technology here, conduct joint naval exercises in the Gulf of Aden. This was in 2021. This was an anti-piracy exercise, so it wasn't anything like on the scale of Vostok 2022. And the other area that India is involved in, of course, is the so-called Quad. Some people saying that the Quad is some kind of embryonic alternative to NATO involving India, the United States, and a couple of other countries. But Patrick, this simply isn't the case. And very briefly, I'm not seeing the same degree of cooperation between India and NATO countries as we're seeing between India, China, and Russia at the moment. And so any suggestion in the Western media that India is building new aircraft carriers because they're worried about China, I just don't see that at this point.
No, you don't see it. What you do see is India pursuing policies that are in its own self-interest, so exerting its own sovereignty. One of the big issues there, of course, is where it's going to be buying its oil, where it's going to buy its gas, and the Modi government in India, because they haven't committed to shutting Russia out of that equation. So they're basically saying, no, we're going to go with the best price and with the best delivery terms and etc. So this is what they've done. So what you have seen and what should get more attention is the fact that India is now considering providing Pakistan with some financial aid. And along that conversation, possibly it's become better diplomacy as well. So I think personally, I've said this for years, it's in the interest of United States and Britain that Pakistan and India are at each other's throats constantly. And this is also used to create some polarity with China in the region as well. So the bottom line here is from the Western point of view, will be to stymie the development of trade routes via the Belt and Road Initiative, but just the natural cooperation between Southeast Asia, the ASEAN states, Myanmar, China, India, Pakistan, etc. All these countries to try to stop that development, slow it down, disrupt it, because that's going to lead to basically the problem down the road in the Great Game 2.0, which is to try to cut off Europe, specifically Germany, the economic powerhouses in Europe, from engaging directly with Russia and with the East, because that means that all the geopolitical center of gravity will be in Eurasia and not in the Atlantic Ocean. So this is one thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, indeed. And let's just quickly put Matthew Rycroft on screen. He's formerly, of course, permanent representative for the UK in the United Nations. He's currently Home Office Permanent Secretary. He's been in Fiji in the last couple of days in order to stir things up there, because we don't want any kind of cooperation with China in the region. Let's see what he said. The UK is providing £15 million for the Pacific region through its Conflict Stability and Security Fund programme. Well, Vanessa, just very, very briefly, there is a comma there. If we just put that back on screen for a second, Stephanie, there is a comma there between conflict and the words conflict and stability. My view has always been that comma really isn't appropriate, because every time we see conflict, stability, and security fund money being put into a particular region, it tends to be to support the stability of the conflict that is there already, and so on. Or am I being unfair?
No, no, you're being totally fair. I mean, yeah, the Conflict Stability and Security Fund is there to fund instability in target nations, very much as we saw in Syria, of course.
Yes. And Patrick, then finally in this segment, Poland puts its World War II losses at $1.3 trillion and demands German reparations.
Really, honestly, you couldn't make it up, Mike. But yeah, this is actually happening. There are loud noises within the Polish government to want to demand more reparations from Germany for damage done during World War II. You have to remember this issue was totally put to bed in 1953. And here we have how many years later? What are we, 70 years later or something? It's being resurrected again. And so, where's this rift coming from? There's one of the reasons why this is happening, why you start seeing these fissures between EU member states is because of the issue of Ukraine. So there are people in Poland that are angry at Germany for not providing enough arms or enough assistance or not cutting off enough Russian energy because of the Ukraine issue. So it's amazing how the infighting has begun when you start to tighten the economic screws on the EU, on these countries like Poland, like Germany, other states, then then the money is not flowing as much. There's shortages. People are getting a little bit more frugal. Then the blame game starts. The finger pointing starts. And now this is the latest episode. The conversation about reparations gets revived as well. So I don't think positive that's going to come out of this type of conversation. But what's next after this? Well, let's talk about borders. There's parts of Poland that Germany would believe possibly that belong to Germany, and vice versa. There's parts of Western Ukraine that Poland would say that's their rightful territory. So I think the next phase, if it starts escalating along these sort of lines, is going to be revanctionist redrawing of European maps and things like this. So
Yeah.
this is an incredibly interesting development.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Now let's move on to this from the James Roguski Substack, and he's asking, what is the government of the United Kingdom hiding? Freedom of information requests have revealed that the UK is withholding information that, in their own words, would be likely to harm relations between the UK and other World Health Organization member states. So in January 18th, 2022, the Biden administration submitted a number of proposed amendments to the international health regulations. He writes, prior to the 75th World Health Assembly, the UK government was obligated to prepare a legal opinion and a risk analysis of the UK position regarding the proposed amendments. On the 1st of May 2022, a UK citizen submitted a Freedom of Information request requesting the legal opinion and risk analysis. On the 6th of July, the FY team for the government responded to the request with a counter request for clarification. On the 7th of July, the UK citizen replied via email with a clarification of the request. On the 5th of August 2022, the Freedom of Information team responded to the request and stated that the information that was requested did indeed exist but would not be made available to the UK citizen. On the 8th of August, the UK citizen submitted a formal request for an internal review of the response. And on the 25th of August, the Freedom of Information team submitted their final review, which basically looked like this. To clarify, releasing the requested information would likely harm the relations between the United Kingdom and other World Health Organization member states, while also making public the UK's assessment on the IHR amendments, which are subject to international negotiations. In addition, it would likely harm the United Kingdom's interests abroad, as well as the promotion or protection of those interests abroad. And the other key point here is that it has been concluded that the release of the information could harm such activities. Well, we've seen this type of nonsense from the UK government, in my case, ongoing with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Let's just remind ourselves, if we look at the situation with the censorship network within the UK government at the moment, the key area here that we want to highlight is the Freedom of Information Clearinghouse. And this basically is within the Cabinet Office, a section within the Cabinet Office that takes on the most challenging freedom of information requests, and particularly if they're coming from people on a particular blacklist. They get handled centrally to make sure that no mistakes are made. As I say, I've an ongoing effort with the Foreign Office to get some more information about the Counter Disinformation Media Development Programme headed up by Andy Price. and that is an impossible task because they're using these types of mechanisms to avoid giving the information out. And then the other thing to mention here is that the Counter Disinformation and Media Development Team has been expanded and is now known as the Government Information Cell. People may have an opinion about some of these names, but just look at the number of government departments and sections that are there to deal with not only the types of information that are released by government to investigators and researchers, but also that are also looking at the types of information that's being spread on social media and so on, and building an intelligence picture for government and to help government to counter that information. It's not just the UK, however, because Handelsblatt here has an article. Let's do a quick translation of it. The headline is "Concern for Internal Security. The Office for Protection of the Constitution warns of Russian false information about gas shortages," and so on. And so what's this saying? This was as a result of a press conference held by the director of the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution, and he was warning that citizen protests against the war in Ukraine, rising prices, inflation, and anti-COVID measures would be infiltrated by right-wing extremists and conspiracy believers. And he's basically using that narrative to justify exactly the same type of infrastructure being built up to control the narrative in Germany and to spy on German citizens and the types of information that they're spreading on the internet, as we've had in the UK for quite a number of years now. And then just to finish this off, I'll just make the point that obviously we mentioned at the start of the program, the leadership election taking place at the closing today and the announcement on Monday. It was interesting, I thought, that the only parliamentary bill that had been updated today was the online safety bill. This, of course, has been delayed and is going to be back on the agenda once there is a new leader and a new prime minister. So this was updated. The page on the parliamentary bills website was updated today, clearly very much at the forefront of the upcoming parliamentary session. But Patrick, Twitter now allowing people to edit their tweets.
Yeah, for the low price of $4.99, you become a member of Twitter Blue, and you got 30 minutes to edit your tweets. There'll be Wikipedia style editing tree there, so you can go in and see the edits that have been made. But a lot of people have been asking for this for years. I'm of a mixed view on this. The whole point of Twitter is the thrill of the permanence there, that whatever statement you make is going to be nailed to the wall. You can't change it. So you got to delete the tweet or you got to own it, basically. So that's been the USP of Twitter. And when you introduce this new thing, I don't know how this is going to change the way people tweet or the statements they make. Some make the argument, Mike, that it means they're going to spend longer on each tweet. In other words, you compose the tweet, then you have second thoughts about it, then you're going to revise it, then you're going to revise it again. And then you might say, oh, that's too much. Then you're going to delete it. Then you're going to repost it again. Certainly that people do more laborious comments and revisions on platforms like Facebook, where Twitter, before a lot of time is spent composing the tweet, then you tweet it and then it's up there basically and you just own it. Now they've introduced this. I think personally this is degrading the sort of fundamental quality of Twitter. I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I mean, I don't know is the answer. I don't particularly have any. But look, let's just finish off here. We've got a couple of video clips. First of all, Joe Biden.
Well, the midterm elections are coming up. This is a high stakes election, one of the most consequential elections in U.S. history, some would argue here. And so angry Joe Biden has been wheeled out. So this is like angry Joe. You've got quiet Grandpa Joe. Now you've got angry Joe. So whatever they've done to juice his coffee or whatever, he's come out last night swinging, basically accusing the Republican Party of being an extremist party that doesn't observe the rule of law, that's anti-constitutional, etc. I just have to roll this clip and you can kind of hear it for yourself.
much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
So there it is. There it is, straight from the horse's mouth. So the divisiveness. This is the basket of deplorables moment for the White House, for Joe Biden. I don't know how much further they can go with this. The main complaint, if you look at the Washington Post, is wall-to-wall January 6th committee, Trump, Mar-a-Lago, hiding documents, etc. The main thing that the mainstream press is attacking Republicans for is questioning the results or the election irregularities in 2020. So apparently this is tantamount to treason now in America. If you question any of the means or methods by which elections are conducted, vote counting happens, or any kind of allegations of fraud, a lot of Democrats made those allegations in 2016, and in fact went so far as to blame the victory of Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton as being a Russian influence operation or Russian interference operation. That was fair game back then, but now on the other side of the coin, partisan-wise, it's not. Now, Carrie Lake is running for governor in Arizona, and she's made some pretty controversial statements, but she's been challenged by the mainstream press at a recent rally about this issue of challenging the elections. And here's her response. So listen carefully to how she feels this challenge by a mainstream journalist on this issue.
Do you feel like Joe Biden is dividing the...
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, you said you feel like Joe Biden is dividing the country, but do you feel like Donald Trump is doing the same by falsely telling people that he won that election when he lost it?
How does that divide the country? Questioning an election where there are obviously problems is dividing the country? Since when can we not ask questions about our elections? As a journalist for many years, I was a journalist after 2016, and I distinctly remember many people just like you asking a lot of questions about the 2016 election results. And nobody tried to shut you up. Nobody tried to tell Hillary Clinton to shut up. Nobody tried to tell Kamala Harris when she was questioning the legitimacy of these electronic voting machines to stop. We have freedom of speech in this country, and you of all people should appreciate that. You're supposedly a journalist. You should appreciate that. So I don't see how asking questions about an election where there are many problems is dividing a country. What I do see dividing a country is shutting people down, censoring people, canceling people, trying to destroy people's lives when they do ask questions. Last I heard, we still have the Constitution. It's hanging by a thread, thanks to some of the work some people in this area have done. But we're going to save that Constitution, and we're going to bring back freedom of speech. And maybe someday you'll thank us for that.
Strong stuff, Patrick.
Strong stuff, and you're looking at potentially there, if she's successful in her governor run in November, you're looking at a potential running mate for Donald Trump or for Ron DeSantis there in Carrie Lake. Now, she doesn't have a lot of political experience. Her experience has been in media, but you can see how well presented she is and how cogent she is with her arguments. She's a pretty impressive force from that sort of political PR point of view. So, and she's a very strong supporter of Trump and a very strong conservative. So, very interesting character that's emerged on the political scene in America.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thanks to Vanessa. We're going to have to end it there. We will be back in a few minutes on the main live stream for some extra. But otherwise, well, hopefully we'll see as many people as possible on the Alternative View conference on Sunday, but we'll be back for a news program at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. I hope everyone has a great weekend. See you then. Bye-bye.